Hey, this is Brian, thanks for watching Keys. In today's video, I'm gonna show you step-by-step how to install a pure 800 turbo on a 992 Carrera. Now, whether you have a base S, GTS, the process is going to be exactly the same, and you can get similar power results. With the pure 800 turbo on 93 octane alone and proper supporting mods and tuning, you have the ability to get over 600 wheel horsepower and even more on race gas in E85. As you can see by looking at it, what Pure does is they take a stock core, this is actually the turbo from the passenger side of the vehicle just for comparison, and they modify it. They put it in a CNC, they bore it out, put in custom compressor wheels, turbine wheels, and make an absolute beast out of the factory turbo. What does that mean for you? That means it is in the perfect package where it's direct plug and play. You don't have to worry about aftermarket cooling, aftermarket oiling, and all of that nonsense, and it's going to give you amazing power out of your 992. So with that, let's get started with today's installation. In this video, I'm going to show you every nut, every bolt, every gasket, every torque spec that you need to know to do this project in your garage. As you can see, we have the car on a lift. This is totally unnecessary. You do not need a lift to do this process, but you are going to need a jack and jack stands, and you need to remove the rear wheels. As you can see on this 992 4S, we have the bumper removed. That is not for this video. We're actually installing DO88 intercoolers, intakes. We have the intercooler piping, a plenum, and a few other things that we needed to take apart the back of the car for. If you're curious on how to remove the spoiler, the light bar, and the bumper, we have a video on how to do that down below. But if you take a look over here with me, all you really need to do to get access to the turbo is remove your wheel liner, which is in our bumper removal video. And look, it's right here. It is by far the best turbo location out of any vehicle I have ever worked on, from BMW to McLaren. It is so easy to get to. All right, so with that, let's get started. First thing, as I said, you need to remove the wheels and also the wheel liner. Once again, you do not need to remove the bumper. Let me get the car up a little bit higher and I'll show you what to do next. All right, first things first, let's remove the intake tube at the top over here. There's a 7mm. You could also use a slotted screwdriver if you prefer. Then down at the bottom, you can release this bolt over here. It's an E10 eTorx. Then what you can do is pop off this clamp here and rotate it down and off. I'm just gonna hang it here for a second. Now, when you go to remove this, there's a little piece of plastic on the inlet that actually goes in the metal, so you can't actually twist it. Make sure that you have this and you just pull it straight out. Sometimes they get a little stuck. There we go. And then on the top, you can wiggle that off just like that. Next, over here, we can disconnect the wastegate. Now, there is a little tab that you can press over here. It gets a little challenging because of the rubber boot. So if you take a pick tool, you can just pry up a little bit on the tab, and that'll come up, and you can just tuck it up here out of the way. And while we're on electrical connections, you can release your O2 sensor. So what you do with this, you use your fingernail or a pick tool. You want to pry up on that little tab and then press down, and that's going to pull off just like that. And you can just disconnect this and just let it hang for now. Now that we're done on the intake side, let's move over to the intercooler piping. So over here, there's another 7mm clamp. So just get this nice and loose, and you can just get this hose and just pop it off and push it to the side. All right, next, let's do as much as we can with this E10 before we switch tools. So what we're going to do is we're going to first start off with this E10 over here, remove this. Then we're going to shift over to this one. There's one more on the bottom, and we're going to need our E10 to remove this heat shield as well. So we'll start with this one. This one just holds the line in place. This looks like that. Okay, then we can remove this one. Now, the extension that I'm using is a wobble, so you can see it doesn't sit perfectly straight, because if you try to use a straight one, you can't really get in there, you will hit. So just make sure you use a good swivel or something to get in here. And then underneath here, this one's pretty long. Okay, looks like that. All right, for this next part, you are going to spill a little bit of oil and coolant. It is totally normal. We've done this job where we drained everything first, and we've also done it where we didn't drain anything. And basically what happens is you spill pretty much the exact same amount, so there's no need to pre-drain everything. What I like to do is do the turbo job, and then after, refill the coolant and also do a fresh oil change. So as you can see on the floor here, we have an oil pan to catch. We also have a sorbent towel. It will make a little bit of a mess, but don't worry, you're not going to lose all of the oil in your car. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna remove this oil line on the side. What I like to do is just try to get a pick tool in here. You can just rock it back and forth. and then start to navigate this out. As you can see, it's not anything crazy. Then you can take your big oil line, wiggle that out, make sure that these are separated, and watch your shoe. All right, so we're just gonna let that hang out and drip. Then I'm going to just take this oil line and just navigate it over here out of the way. Now, we've already done the turbo on the opposite side of the car. It is very similar. There are just a few differences, so let's go take a look over there and I'll show you one of the things that's different. Now, on the passenger side, there are three main differences. First, on your inlet, you have a PCV connection over here. So to remove this, all you do is press down on the rib section of this piece of plastic here. There's a clip over here, a clip over here. When you squeeze it like this, it's going to expand it and then you can pop it off. Behind this, as you can see over here, the oil and coolant lines and whatnot, they are all hard lines. They are not very flexible. So there's a little bracket up here. There's an E10. If you remove the top, typically it gives you a little bit more wiggle room where you can pop these lines out of these little clips here. Gives you a little bit more room to work with. And then the third thing that's different is that there is an extra connection on top of the other turbo on the other side of the car. So really the big differences are going to be this one has a PCV and it also has hard lines. Other than that, it's going to be the exact same process from the left to the right side of the car. Now, since we have our E10 out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to remove all of the bolts so that we can start to remove some of the heat shielding on the turbo. So there's one over here, there's two over here, one here, and then two on the top. So let's go through one by one, starting with this one. Then we'll get the back two. Then you have these two. All right, then there's this one over here. And then the last two bolts are up here. I'm just gonna remove this O2 sensor wire, get this out of my way. Oh, and these look nice and corroded. One. Okay, and then once that is out, you can just drop this whole thing straight down. Looks just like that. All right, so now that we have access to everything down here and kind of while we're under here, we're going to remove the link pipe, the down pipe, whatever you'd like to call it. Let's start off by removing the O2 sensor. So basically what we're going to do, we're going to use a 22 millimeter O2 sensor tool. We're going to put it on here and we're just going to carefully spin the wire and we're going to get it out of the way. There's a little clip up here. I would highly recommend popping it out of the clip just so you can twist the wire. Now, for those of you who are thinking, why don't you just unplug it? You certainly can. In fact, I did on the other side of the car, but you have to remove your bumper to be able to get to the connection. So that is totally up to you. This is an acceptable practice in Porsche's eyes. So this is how we're going to do it today. You can just crack this loose. And once you break the initial torque, you should be able to do it by hand. And then once you get that out, just kind of let it hang right there. Next, we're going to remove the V-band that connects your link pipe to your turbo. Now, if you take a look over here, you can tell Porsche assembled this off the car and then lifted it up because they put it in a terrible spot. This is a 6 mil. You basically just need to navigate a little tool up here. But as you can see, you just have very little room to work. And once you get it loose enough, I like to just spin it from the bottom. That typically works pretty good. Okay, and then that pulls out just like this. Now, one of the things that I do when I reassemble this, if you want to take a look on the other side of the car, I put it super easy to get to. So if you ever need to get to it again, it's super easy to access from the bottom. The clamp does the exact same thing. It's just, now it's easy to access. So I wish Porsche would just do that from the beginning, but I understand if they're pre-assembled and then they lift everything up. Then what you can do here, take a flathead screwdriver and you can pop this loose. Make sure that you bend this out of the way. Let's do that. Sometimes these get a little bit stuck. All right, so we have that nice and loose. We have to wait until we remove it to get this clamp off. Next, we need to remove this exhaust clamp. There are two 13mm nuts that have seen better days, so don't be surprised if these snap if you live in an area where they salt the roads for the winter. You can see we ended up replacing it on the other side because they were just so bad. So let's see if we can try to remove this without snapping anything. There you go. 2 days ago, I actually did spray these down with PB Blaster, and believe it or not, I hit it with a wire brush. All right, let's see if we can go 2 for 2. Look at that. Once you have these loose, what you want to do is just take this clamp and just shift it over just like that. All right, from here, it's just these 2 E12s, and then this entire piece is going to drop down. Make sure that you note nothing is holding it in. If you'd like to, and I like to do this sometimes, just slide that on there as a precaution. Okay, pull that out. Slide this back over. This will literally just fall right out. All right, now let's remove the coolant lines. You have to remove the bottom one first and then the top one. After you remove this T30, just go in here like this. I'll try to stay out of your way as much as I can. Okay. Okay, looks just like that. Now this part, we're gonna show you everything that we go through to get this out, because if you just try to pull on this, or wiggle it, a lot of times it's gonna be really tight still. Sometimes you can get it, sometimes you can't. What I would recommend is if you have some kind of pick tool, what you can start to do is just start to gently pry it out. And what I also found works really good is if you just keep rocking it back and forth until you can get it to pop out. Now they do use double O-rings, which makes it a little bit more challenging, but if you can get a little bit of a flathead screwdriver in there, the more you rock it back and forth and just very evenly work this out, the easier it's going to be. Okay, so I did that side a little bit. Try to get this side. And there we go. It is starting to pop out. Okay. And there we have this side. I'm just gonna very carefully pull that out of the way. And then we are left with this one over here. Same exact thing. Try to rock it up and down as much as you can. What I found works best is if you can get a little screwdriver on the side and start to find a little bit of a lip. A lot of times you can start to get that to pop off. Now, if it's really stuck, like this one's pretty stuck here, try to decrud the side and then just see if you can get a little pick tool, little trim tool in here. Start to separate it out to a point where we can start to just pry it up just a little bit to get it moving. All right, so this one's super tight. So I'm just gonna take my little tiny screwdriver here and just gently tap to try to separate this a little bit. All right, I'm starting to be able to get that in there a little bit. So I can start to work it this way. Still pretty snug, so I'm gonna just go up in size with my screwdriver, see if I can get a little something a little bit bigger in there. Now that I have a little bit of a groove, because what I want to try to do is try to lift it evenly from here and also here, and then I can start to get the bottom. Problem is the bottom is flush. It sits in this little recess, so it makes it a little bit more challenging, but still very doable. There we go. See, we're getting some positive movement there, but again, you never want to pry on one spot too long. So let's start to move this around. Oh, now we've got a lot more motion. Okay, so I'll try to go to the right side here. Try to get this other one more so up the left. There we go. And pop it out. That literally is going to be the worst part of this job. You can see, look at this corrosion. This is disgusting. I mean, that thing was like really on there. Next, there's a T30 over here. And we'll get this line out of the way. And then we'll be able to do our final oil line. Then it's just 4 bolts and the turbo's out. Okay, this bolt's pretty long. And this just wiggles straight out pretty effortlessly. Then up top, we just have our oil line. Again, it's a T30. So you can remove this. When you go to remove it, you are gonna have to push in on this heat shield a little bit. It's nice and flexible, but otherwise you will get a little bit hung up. Okay. So same as before, try to wiggle it. Unfortunately, this guy is pretty stuck too. You can see how corroded all this stuff is in here. So I am just going to have to try to get my screwdriver in here again. Very carefully, just tap it in. Once again, we're gonna be as even as possible. Boom, just like that. All right, last thing we need to do, remove these 4 12mm nuts, and then the turbo will be free. And when you're doing this, don't be surprised if the stud comes out on you. It's not the end of the world if that happens. All right, from here, just make sure your O2 sensor wire is out of the way. You just lift up. Make sure it's not caught on any of the lines. And your turbo's off. All right, so what we're going to do now that we have the old turbo off the car, we have to transfer over the wastegate and also this O2 sensor. To remove the wastegate actuator, there are 4 T25 bolts right over here. So at this time, you can carefully remove them. Then we can flip it over like this. And this is when the fun starts, because Porsche decided it was a great idea to use all of these little T10s. Haha, so what I do is I bought the 24 pack because these, I guess under all of the heat that it goes through, the heating and the cooling, they really get seized up a lot of times. So don't be surprised if you break a couple bits or a couple of these little bolts. So let's see how long we can go with 1 bit. All right, I don't know if you can see this or not. I already twisted the bit. This is why I buy the 24 pack. Okay, I'm gonna get another one just because I want to start strong. Already twisted. It's already kind of rounded. All right, I'll come back to that one. Okay, again, look how twisted that is. And I can tell you from experience, it doesn't really matter what brand you buy, because I break them all. Oh, that was a good one. Look, I just snapped it off. And you can see I'm doing this very carefully. I'm not being reckless, but look. Come on, Porsche. I'm feeling good about this one. I'm feeling good about it getting stuck. Oh, that was the easy one. All right, so let's be transparent here. I've never actually had this many in a row successful. So I got 3 stuck. It's not too bad. Let's go for high torque. Nope, I just spent it. Gonna have a little star collection when I'm done. All right, 2 is my record. I've never gotten below 2 that weren't destroyed. So if I can get one of these out, I'm gonna set a new personal best. Magnetic drain plug. Come on. All right, it's vice grip time. See, this is the stuff that other channels don't want to show you. All right, let's see if we can get this one. Oh, we got it. All right, if we can get this one, this will be my personal best. All right, so we were able to get this out just by scratching at it with a pick tool and then using our magnet. So now I'm gonna try to lightly tap this in with my 1/4" hammer. And I'm gonna try to, I have the back of the bolt too. Zach, I'm 10 for 10.
No.
Yeah, I'm so excited right now. Personal best, yes! All right, so now that we got all of those out, what we're going to do, take a flathead in here, start to wiggle this up. You're gonna pop it off like so. And then this piece should basically come super loose. You can slide it out. And then you can see our little C-clip. So just grab a flathead. You're gonna need a real skinny one. Just pry it up. We are going to reuse that. All right, so then over here, you wanna take your wastegate arm, carefully pop it up and over, and this whole thing's gonna slide out just like that. Then we're going to insert it on the other side. You will notice that there's a little dowel, or there at least should be. And if you take a look over here at the actuator, there's a little hole where that goes, so you can't mess it up. Navigate this in here, and then everything will just kind of snap in place. Get your little C-clip over here, and typically you can just push that on with your hand. So then you can take your T25s and you can reinstall them in here. Now Porsche technically doesn't really want you taking this off. Whenever you look at the repair manuals or whatnot, they typically just think you're going to replace the entire turbo. So you can just snug these up. I'm gonna torque them to 8 Newton meters, which is a pretty light torque. Most of the other bolts that are just slightly thicker get torqued down to 10. So we should be pretty good with 8, or just go hand tight. Okay, so now you can take your cover, slide it back under here. As far as I know, Porsche does not sell these little bolts, and I don't really want to reuse the ones I took off. These are actually an M3x8. I'm just going to replace them all, and we're just gonna snug these up. Now the clamp we removed was one of these 360 ear clamps. I wouldn't recommend reusing that. Typically, the easiest thing that you can do, and it's also super strong, I like to use these metal zip ties. These can hold 200 pounds. So they are totally strong enough to be able to hold this, but they're very easy to work with, and you don't have to worry about getting all these different sizes and all. You just get a little tool like this. Everything is nice and tight. And most of these tools will even have a little cutter. Just gonna rotate it. Now, one of the things that's inside of here is the adjustment nut if you need to adjust your wastegate. Typically, when we do these, if you're going to something like a pure turbo, which is going to use an OEM core, typically you don't have to touch it. There are situations though where you will need specialty Porsche software that will tell you exactly how much you need to adjust that. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to put it back. I do just want to let you know that A, you might need to go to the dealer after this just to have them adjust the wastegates, or you'll have to have the Porsche software to be able to properly do it yourself, which a lot of people just don't have access to. Then what we need to do is take our O2 sensor tool, pop it on here, and then pop this off. And then we can reinstall this in the new turbo. Okay. And just snug that up. All right, so at this point, everything is pre-assembled and ready to go. We do need to lubricate it. I like to use Liqui-Moly's turbocharger additive. If you've watched any of our turbo videos, I probably threw this inside. What you do, I already cut the cap off, is you just drop some of this in the top of the turbo there, just like that. And what that's going to do is that's going to stick inside of it and make sure that everything is properly lubricated. If your turbo is not properly lubricated when you first start the car, you could burn the turbo up. For 10 bucks or whatever this costs. It is a great insurance policy. All right, so now that the turbo is prepped and ready to go, what we need to do now is we need to clean off these lines with a clean microfiber because they are quite gross. And then I need to change out all of the O-rings. What I found to be the most helpful is if you start with the O-ring in the back and then get the one in the front, and when you go to reinstall them, do it in the opposite order. Do the front one, and then you can kind of walk the second one on the front. So let me go grab the new O-rings for this. We'll swap them out. Okay, so once again, get the front one, then roll this over to the back one, make sure everything is nice. And we'll do the next one. All right, so what you're going to do is take a new seal. I'm gonna push this on. Make sure it goes all the way down. And whenever you're installing a new turbo, you always want to use new hardware as well. So let's go set this up, install it, and we'll torque the nuts down to 25 Newton meters. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to start pushing all of these lines back in, and then all of the bolts that hold them in are going to get torqued down to 10 Newton meters. Just carefully line everything up, push everything in, and like I said, all the bolts are the same torque on this. They're all 10 Newton meters. Okay, all right, so now what we're gonna do, put your coolant lines up, get these situated. Remember, the top one is going to go in first, and then the bottom one. Okay, and you can install your T30. Okay, and you can take your vent tube, put this in. It's also a T30, and it also gets torqued down to 10 Newton meters. Okay, so then your oil line is gonna go in here, and your long E10 goes through this spot here. And then this one goes in here. And these are both E10s, and the torque is also 10 Newton meters. All right, now you can take your wastegate actuator, just bend this around here like that. Make sure that's clipped in. Then you can take your hose over here, your intercooler piping. Pop that on just like that. And you have your O2 sensor up here. This is going to get routed in this little clip. And it's going to get clipped in here and then go up here. And this is going to go in here, clip it, lock it, tuck it back. That's good. And then you can take your inlet, make sure your clamp is where you can get it, slide that on, and then remember there's a little plastic tab that lines up in a groove just like that. And then these get torqued down, both this, and this all technically get the same torque spec, which is 5.5 Newton meters. Okay, so now take a new seal and just gently press it in. All right, so what we're gonna do now is replace our heat shield with our E10s. Then you can torque all these down to 10 Newton meters. Now when installing your cat spec, what I like to do is slide this on in this orientation. Again, we are using a new one because the old one was pretty nasty. And then also you can see I have my V-band on here. I like to slide it on, make sure that it's in a good position. Now, one of the things that I said earlier is that when I put these clamps back on, these V-bands, I always like to make sure that it's facing up because it's so much easier if you actually have to remove it or anything like that. I'm just gonna align this. Okay, so that's good. And you can get these bolts good to go as well. All right, first things first, we're going to tighten this down. Again, this is a 6mm, and this is going to get torqued down to 20 Newton meters. Then on the exhaust clamp here, you can tighten these down to 30 Newton meters, and this is a 13 mil. Then you can torque these two E12s down to 23 Newton meters. Last, we have our O2 sensor. Carefully wind it back the opposite way that we're going to thread it in. So that way, once you do thread it in and get it nice and tight, there will be no tension on the wires. Okay. Then if you haven't done so already, transfer over this little bracket. These are E10s and they get torqued to 10 Newton meters. Make sure you have them both pretty loose and then you can snuggle up. All right, so at this point, there are two things that I need to do. One we're going to do off camera, one we're going to do on camera. You can see we're going to be doing the coolant on camera. And that's because we did spill just a little bit of coolant. So what we're going to do is we are going to vacuum bleed the system and just add just a little bit more, just to make sure that we have plenty for the car. The car only has 19 or 20,000 miles on it, so the coolant in the car is still plenty good. I do like to do the oil change after we do a turbo. One thing that I don't want to forget to let you know, when you start your car with new turbos for the very first time, expect to see a little bit of smoke. Not a crazy amount of smoke, but a little smoke, because from manufacturing, the turbos are going to have a little bit of oil on them, and that's going to need to burn off. So don't get freaked out if you see a little bit of oil. Obviously, make sure that you're paying attention, making sure that there's not a bigger issue. But I do want to let you know, on that first startup, expect a little bit of smoke. Now, when it comes to the coolant, you're going to get coolant. Now, when it comes to the coolant, what we're going to do is we are going to mix genuine Porsche coolant with distilled water. It is a 50-50 blend, unless you live in somewhere like Antarctica. But for the most of us, it's just going to be 50-50. So we're just gonna pour this in here. I've already prepped it with 2 gallons, and make sure you use distilled water. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to use our vacuum bleeder to bleed out any air that got into the system, and also we're going to fill it with the proper amount of coolant. So as you can see, I do have a container over here. That's just so that there's not this nasty coolant air spraying everywhere. And then we have our air line, and we have a link for this tool down in the description below. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it there for a second. Make sure that it doesn't move. If it moves, you have a coolant leak. So we are good. I'll turn that. This will pull up some coolant. We're really not gonna need all that much. And that's it. All right, so then just verify that your level is correct, and then you can reinstall your cap. And that's how easy it is to install pure turbos on your 992 911. If you're interested in a set, or you're looking for other performance or maintenance items for your Porsche, be sure to see the links down in the description to kies.com, KIES.com. Once again, my name is Brian. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and be sure to come back, because we have a ton of DO88 parts, we have CSF parts, and so much more coming for the 992. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.